Modern perceptions of religious origins often rely on grand institutional architecture and polished, sterile rituals. We celebrate historical myths crafted in pristine marble, but the first-century reality of Judea was defined by suffocating dust, the smell of iron, and the crushing terror of Roman state executions. By the year 66 CE, the Roman-Jewish War had turned Jerusalem into a lethal pressure cooker. Outside the walls, Roman legions practiced brutal psychological warfare, crucifying hundreds of refugees every day to show those trapped inside the exact cost of trying to flee. Inside the walls, radical militias intentionally burned their own city's food stores to force the starving population to fight to the death. Caught in the crossfire of this nightmare was a small, highly vulnerable community. The early Christian movement survived this trap, but they were not saved by a council of generic apostles acting on spiritual intuition. They were saved by the localized trauma and the strict tactical discipline of Jesus' direct biological family. The architect of this massive survival operation was Simeon, the son of Clopas and the biological cousin of Jesus. Facing total annihilation in 70 CE, Simeon orchestrated a highly coordinated physical military extraction, leading thousands of refugees straight through a war zone. Yet today, Simeon's name has largely vanished from the standard historical record. The architects of two major world religions systematically scrubbed his existence, overriding the trauma of a single family to consolidate and protect their own institutional power. The foundation of this movement was built on profound familial grief. In the immediate psychological aftermath of Jesus' execution, the biological uncle, Cleopas, fled the city toward Emmaus to escape the epicenter of their trauma. Waiting in that village was James, the victim's brother, who collapsed into shock and swore a lethal vow of absolute starvation. Institutional tradition fractured this story into disconnected pieces, but when we overlay the canonical Gospel of Luke with a surviving fragment from the Gospel of the Hebrews, we see they describe the exact same room and the exact same family reunion. Both texts use identical language to describe an unrecognized stranger sitting at the table with the starving brother. He took, blessed, broke, and gave the bread. Recognition arrived through the intimate muscle memory of a brother's hands. The specific way he tore the bread broke the starvation vow, initiating the ritual of the Eucharist. And as this diagram shows, ancient authors placed specific biological relatives, like Joanna, at the exact structural bullseye of these records to prove the movement was grounded in a real, traumatized family. As the early church expanded into a global Greco-Roman empire, the biological bloodline of one Galilean household became a political threat. Scribes deliberately struck through specific familial titles in the texts, replacing uncles and cousins with generic labels like disciples, ensuring the universal institution could be governed by appointed officers rather than a surviving family dynasty. This local family retained immense influence in Jerusalem until 62 CE, when a political assassination shattered the city's fragile balance. Religious authorities illegally executed James the Just, throwing the elder brother from the temple parapet and crushing his skull. In the immediate vacuum of this murder, the terrified community elected Simeon to lead them. Simeon inherited leadership right as the Roman war machine closed in. The Roman legions utilized a tactic known as circumvallation. Circumvallation is the construction of a secondary, continuous defensive perimeter built entirely around a besieged city to ensure absolutely nothing enters and no one escapes. Recognizing the trap, Simeon relied on the Olivet Discourse found in the Gospel of Luke. While later generations read these warnings as spiritual poetry, Simeon translated the text's specific cue, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, into real-time, actionable military intelligence. He commanded his people to flee before the circumvallation wall closed. Bypassing the zealot patrols and the Roman encampments, Simeon led families, the elderly, and the sick down the steep Jericho road. They dropped rapidly into the desolate, unforgiving terrain of the Jordan Valley, crossing the river to seek sanctuary in the mountainous Hellenistic city of Pella. The core of the early church persisted purely because a tactical leader utilized a religious text as a ground-level survival manual. Only later did safe, insulated institutions sterilize this physical military escape into an abstract spiritual metaphor. Documenting the successful subversion of a Roman military blockade carried absolute lethal stakes. If a Roman patrol discovered a factual diary detailing how a refugee community outsmarted the empire, the entire group would face mass crucifixion for treason. To survive censorship, they employed symbolic historiography. Symbolic historiography is the practice of encoding factual, dangerous historical records into the dense, hallucinatory imagery of Jewish apocalyptic literature. This animated decryption table shows how the cipher in Revelation chapter 12 works. The radiant woman fleeing into the wilderness represents the early church community. The massive red dragon pursuing her is the Roman Empire and its relentless military apparatus, and the wilderness is the physical sanctuary of Pella. Hidden within this encrypted narrative is a precise chronological data point. The chart highlights the text's claim that the woman is nourished in the wilderness for exactly 1,260 days. In the apocalyptic calendar language of the era, this translates to exactly 3.5 years, matching the historical duration of the peak of the Roman-Jewish War. Despite orchestrating this logistical masterpiece, Simeon was sidelined by a phenomenon called anamastic gravity. Anamastic gravity is a historical occurrence where the achievements of lesser-known figures are gradually attributed to more famous people over time. Early Christian scribes slowly substituted Simeon's family name Clopas with Cephas, the Aramaic name for the highly prominent Apostle Peter. A second parallel erasure happened within Rabbinic Judaism. Following the war, the surviving sages gathered at Yavne to arrange the daily prayers. Simeon stepped forward to construct a liturgical bridge between traditional Jews and his Nazarene followers. He left a hidden confession in the 15th blessing, writing, "Causes the horn of salvation to flourish." In Hebrew grammar, raising a horn requires a specific proper noun, subtly confirming the abstract noun salvation was actually the literal name Jesus. To obscure his identity, later institutional custodians weaponized a mechanical scribal error known as consonant metathesis. Consonant metathesis is a mistake where letters in a foreign name get accidentally swapped in the brain of a person copying a manuscript by hand. The Hebrew consonants for Clopas, K, L, and P, were inverted over centuries, physically trading places to spell Puli, burying Simeon under the insulting title of Hapakuli, the cotton dealer. By scrambling a few letters, both the growing Christian church and the Orthodox synagogue effectively silenced the singular leader who successfully bridged their increasingly divided worlds. The total destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE forced religious authorities to rely entirely on rigidly controlled texts rather than a physical temple. When the Roman soldiers carried away the menorah, the sacrificial system permanently halted. Back in Israel, rabbinic authorities surgically removed Simeon's 15th blessing and implemented a 19th blessing as a strict loyalty test to exile his followers. But the cover-up had a massive geographic blind spot. The large Jewish diaspora living hundreds of miles away in Babylon remained completely unaware of the bitter theological trench warfare happening back in Judea. When Simeon's arranged prayers finally reached Babylon, the distant Jewish communities did not detect the hidden Nazarene code. Reading the words simply as a beautiful plea for redemption, they preserved Simeon's original 15th blessing exactly as he wrote it. Because the Babylonian Talmud essentially became the universal standard for global Judaism, the attempt to erase Simeon failed on a massive scale. 3 times a day, in every corner of the globe, millions of observant Jews stand facing Jerusalem and unknowingly speak the exact words arranged by the cousin of Jesus. History is written by vast institutions, and those institutions will always build walls of amnesia to protect their own interests. But history is actually lived by people, and the localized, living memory of a shattered family inherently resists being permanently erased.